On a Sphere's Edge. Written by Keith Mosher. Narrated by Keith Mosher. Chapter 2. Moonlighting. Alexandria's tormented dreams faded into a rough awakening. Thinking she was properly situated in her bunk, she rolled over and reached for a light switch. For a split second she felt free fall and then met the business end of artificial gravity, the floor. A churning, acidic feeling came from the pit of her belly. This pain she recognized, and it was not going to stay put for very long. She struggled to her hands and knees and felt her way to the throne. Personal spacecraft comfort stations are anything but comfortable. Often the last thing considered in the design of a private vessel, they tend to be small, irregular in shape, and prove hard enough to get into and positioned on with proper lighting and a fitting sense of balance. 20 minutes and many different biological reactions later, Alex began to feel human again. A water-free bath, a couple alcodrams, some coffee, and she could actually think. She planted herself in the pilot's seat, turned down the tunes, and keyed up the Navicomputer. She had punched out of hyperspace at the designated spot about 5 hours earlier. I really tied it on, she thought. The Sol boundary net was anywhere between a few hours and a few days away, depending on how fast one might choose to travel, with the Earth-Luna boundary minutes beyond that. Some more time for planning. Clear-headed planning this time. Alcohol can be bliss. It takes you to a forgetful land where reality becomes as intangible as drunk. Almost one day ago, she had worried that the sphere may have changed her in some way. She remembered deciding, before Jack Daniels tucked her in bed, that it had not. She still had her training, her past, and some ability to choose. No being is ever completely free. The sphere had not made her less free. At least she did not feel any influence from it other than the desire to look at it. She was all Alexandria Novastra, perhaps more than just Alex. She had not done anything out of character since seeing the sphere, nothing torrid or crazy. Quite the contrary. Her decisions and actions had been deliberate. Her thoughts were clear. While she refreshed these revelations from the night before and checked on her instruments, she was mindlessly stroking the edge of something that rested beside her pilot's seat, in the same way one might pet a cat or finger some curious crinkle in the arm of a chair while pondering deeper issues. The first consideration in any plan is to examine your enemies. Someone at HQ wanted the sphere. She had determined that was fact. Smalls sent her looking for it. Whoever it was, they wanted it badly. They may have had her followed. They may have even sent out many different agents and teams on the same quest. It just happened that Alex reached the goal line first. It was also possible that other folk not associated with the fleet, or even the affiliate for that matter, were on her trail. In the first regard, she needed to buy a little time. She would need the resources that a fleet officer granted her, everything from fuel to food to credits, and especially inside information and intelligence. In the latter consideration, staying close to the fleet and affiliate HQ may offer some shielding. Some outside individual may not be so quick to crash a fleet party. Without being aware of it, she mindlessly picked up the item she had been caressing and clutched it to her chest, drumming it with her fingers while she thought. She turned her attention to Admiral Smalls. The decision to look for the sphere came from him. However, he may be under orders from above. It might be possible to put a handful of agents and officers on a hunt for information regarding a mythical device, but it would be doubtful that a department or an entire agency could be convinced to use time and resources on such a quest. Organizations do not expend large amounts of energy to obtain the objects of myths and bedtime stories. The search had to be started by an individual, not an organization, either Smalls himself or someone who had him under their thumb. Could some official be a sphere addict? That was unlikely, but possible. It was more likely that, whoever it was purely power-hungry and wanted it with the desire to use its legendary potency to reshape the galaxy to their liking. Suddenly, she realized she was clutching the sphere case, and that shocked her. Quickly, like dealing with some icky thing, she set it down beside her seat and eyed it suspiciously. The whole addictive matter really unnerved her, but there was little she could do about it now. As much as she disliked being hooked, she also understood that in the wrong hands the sphere would destroy life as she knew it. With the wrong intent, whole systems might be enslaved, while other systems cleansed as a nice euphemism for being wiped out of existence. At least for the moment it was safe. Safe with her, as long as she stayed strong and did not use it, regardless of how it called to her. Alex was not sure she was the right person to keep the sphere, but she was sure that some power-driven, untrusty individual would not use it to civilization's best interests. She would have to set aside her love for the fleet and even her own self-concerns in favor of her love for civilization and peace. She turned her attention back to planning her next move, which required a little more profiling and examination of the current situation. Within the fleet, her primary concern was Smalls. He may have a few officers in his use. She did not know what they knew, but most likely Smalls would have followed more generalized tactics, having them follow her while giving them very little information on her assignment. Beyond the fleet, almost anyone was a potential threat, including rogue officers within the fleet, but both of these were less likely. When she left Eridus, she headed toward Affiliate HQ, Earth, home. If she had been followed, that individual would have observed her drop into hyperspace. They would have detected the position of her craft and where the density wave formed, as well as the strength of the initial gravity flux. With those facts, they would have drawn basic calculations and determined that she was probably headed toward Earth's solar system, though at exactly what apparent speed they could not have known, nor could they have determined which planet, moon, or space station was her destination. She checked her computer, hoping there might be other systems her direction could have included. There were a few, but they were extremely unlikely. If she was following a fleet officer, she would have ruled them out herself. As far as some detached individual or group following her, the departure would have the same appearance, but that would be to good advantage. She would have appeared to be heading toward Affiliate HQ. They would probably hold back, trying to arrive in the Sol system a bit after her. Moreover, they would be working in a very stealthy fashion. The more a person tries to be secretive, the more they appear suspicious, especially in public settings. That might be an advantage for Alex and a means of ferreting out her tail. If it was the fleet that was trailing her, that individual would probably make some best guess and try to arrive in the Sol system about the time they expected her to arrive, not too far ahead and not too far behind. Because of her intended midway stop in her long dance with Mr. Daniel, they undoubtedly would arrive before she would get there. They will have filed a report before heading toward HQ. The report, along with her own, would give the impression that all things were normal, so no alarms would go off. However, not popping into the system and reporting in when the tail calculated that she probably would might put Smalls on alert. Once again she began mindlessly stroking the case. When she left Rawls' condoplex, her first instinct was to return to HQ. Her objectives were now different, but still she felt a need to continue to Earth and home. She was not sure if this was her own desire or some guidance from the sphere, but once again these thoughts and feelings made sense no matter where they originated from. She needed to be reassured that the universe had not changed, that Mom was still there and Dad still strict as ever. The police fleet was based there. information to be gathered. Often the heart of danger is the safest place to be. People so rarely look inward. But if she was going there, she needed to generate some plausible explanation for the delay, just in case. Sneaking into Earth orbit and landing is impossible. You really cannot sneak in. The security nets that encircle the solar system and the Earth-Luna system can detect a pea-sized meteorite and determine to the square inch where it will enter the upper stratosphere. Still fondling the case, she opted for another course of action. It might be time to return to the antics of her youth. Act silly, drunk, and horny, avoid, evade, and lie a bit. Hiding a landing is impossible. Instead, throw the dogs off the scent by letting them smell you all over the place. Crashing in after a binge was nothing new to Alex. She had done it a dozen times in her younger years. As the daughter of a chief inspector to the affiliate, she could not be caught drunk and bar-hopping as Ms. Novastra. If you work hard, you tend to play harder. But she has an advantage now that she did not have then. She has rank. She called up some information from her console. An old school chum was stationed on the dark side of the moon. What a pit job. Moon detail was bad enough, but dark side net monitoring was both dull and tense. This might be the kink in the armor that she needed. At least it might get her inside the border net. Well, Mark, it's going to be so nice to see you again. Alex leaned back in her seat and began plotting. She could trust Mark to a degree. They had been through some wild times at the academy. They both were in that elite clique that every class has. Of their group, Mark bent the rules a bit more than most. Being good at what you do does not mean always being righteous. She believed that her current status had not gone very far beyond Admiral Small's office. In fact, her status still should be only that of a field officer on duty. However, no matter what happened, reports would have to be filed, records generated, questions asked, answers expected. She would need Mark's help without him knowing he was helping her. She looked at the nearly empty bottle of liquor. Jack, I need your help again. She had delayed long enough. Now she needed to make up for lost time. She began laying in the hyperhole program. Then she noticed that she was doing everything one-handed while the other hand unconsciously held on to the sphere case. Damn it! She yanked her hand away as if she had touched a hot surface. Monkey on my back, more like ghost in my head. Damn! She put both hands to work and quickly plotted a speedy course homeward. Then she punched the button and her little ship punched its hole in space. A few hours later, her vessel's engine pushed her little ship back into normal space and parked it right where she had programmed, 1/2 AU outside of the Oort cloud and the Sol system's outer boundary net, just above the solar pole. This outer security net is weak and flimsy, with many gaps. It is merely a loose network of distantly placed sensors with the sole purpose of identifying craft crossing the line to help identify comings and goings. Technically, it is illegal to drive through the net in hyperspace. You are supposed to stop, transmit your ID, and receive permission to pass, flying through the net at sublight, and then continue to your destination in hyperspace or at sublight for the outermost stops. However, hyperholing through this first boundary is about as severe as running a stop sign. It is illegal, but not terribly so, though it does put inner security nets on more of a hair trigger. The inner security networks are different. They are more sensitive, more complete, more powerful, and designed to detect and even block hyperspace travel. Hyperspace wormholes close to large gravity wells can have catastrophic effects. Those inner barriers are more than sensors. They are traps. Interconnected by quantum entanglement, they can instantly detect breaches even through hyperspace. In the case of a hyperspace rupture, the networked satellites instantly flood the broach triangulation with wavefronts that have a very negative effect on anything in hyperspace. That is where she would have to be tricky and careful. The moment she pops out of hyperspace within the system, she will be detected. Border patrols do not take kindly to ships suddenly appearing unannounced. Nerves get rattled, fingers get twitchy, as there seem to be terrorists around every asteroid. Her show has to be already in play. She could not wait until she was inside to start her cover-up. But at the same time, she had to be ready to move or change her plans quickly. She plotted a hyperspace course to just outside of the Earth-Luna boundary net on the Moon's plane of orbit near the Moon's dark side. She began adjusting components of her ship's engine, dialing back emission chokes and dampers, making her ship a bit less efficient, and even causing it to spill small amounts of gases and other control substances. This had the effect of making her ship appear mildly damaged, and that it had been driven hard and poorly. The gases and emissions would also have the added effect of blurring the exact location of her exit from hyperspace. Next, she reached under the main console desk and pulled out a circuit card. 1/4 of the indicators went dark. She removed one module on the card and replaced it improperly, and then slid the card back in place. Most of the console's lights returned. She took a shot of the Jack Daniels, and then poured a bit of it in her hand and patted herself down with it. Feeling ready, she engaged the flight course. Her tiny vessel shuddered as the primary engine powered up. The density wave formed ahead of her, but it was irregularly shaped. Her ship bucked and groaned as it fell into the hole. It was going to be a bumpy ride, but fortunately, a short one. Almost immediately, the outer system boundary alarm sounded on her console. She flipped it off. She hoped that Mark would be on duty. He was a command grade, so no matter what happened, her appearance would have to be reported to him, but the fewer people who saw her, the better. The pop to sublight was due in 10 minutes. She took another quick shot of Jack D, not for the jolt as much as to flavor her breath. She rinsed it around in her mouth to be sure she would have a distinctive odor. She looked at the case beside her seat. For a while, it had felt more like a fellow conspirator, but now she was feeling more like its keeper. She took the sphere-laden case and stuffed it in a cabinet that locked with a code. The Mitsubishi Warpette's computer sounded the 1-minute warning. She punched instructions to go to manual immediately after sublight pop. Grabbing the maneuver controls, she gritted herself. This little plan could fall apart beyond merely giving Smalls some indication that she was sneaking around. It could go completely awry and end with her and her ship being nothing more than smoking tiny bits, and the nearly indestructible sphere floating freely in space. The Earth-Lunar boundary alert blared loudly, and then she crashed into normal space just outside of the boundary net. She immediately threw her ship through a few radical moves, intentionally nudging her craft through the net at sublight speed, avoiding the barrier's automatic hyperspace defenses. If that doesn't look like drunk flying, then nothing does. Alarms sounded and a voice came over her intercom. "This is the Police Fleet Border Patrol. Unidentified vessel, come to a full stop. Drones and bots are being dispatched to your coordinates." The stern voice repeated its instructions. If her memory was faithful, it might have been Mark giving that police greeting. Whether it was or not, she could not be the one to make that recognition. It would look too set up. Fortunately, whoever it was, he had called her unidentified. Her trick with the automatic owner data transmission module had worked, this time, though it may have triggered a more rapid offensive posture by the border systems. Alex immediately put her ship in station keeping. Some of the emissions that she had dialed back, allowing gases to escape, caused her ship to roll a bit. It was a risk she had calculated. The drones, being remotely controlled, might not react, but the bots are machines. Their programming expects a stopped vessel to be truly stopped. She had to hope that the Border Patrol officer would have a clear head and quickly determine that no real threat exists, and stand the bots down first, and then the drones. Alex was watching her proximity monitor. Drones and bots were converging on her rapidly. She stepped into the role she had planned for herself and put on her silliest, drunkest, horniest act. "Oh, hello, boys." Her view screen came to life. "I'm so sorry, Ossifer. I've been having trouble with this bucket since I left home this morning." She began sweating her choice. The security systems were getting frightfully close. "Release your con to me and we'll see that you are safe. Now give me your Alex? Is that you?" "Mark, hey! Long time no tea. Oh, hell." She giggled and bounced like a party girl. She heard Mark cuss through his teeth. "Shit!" As he turned his attention to his console, she shot a glance at her proximity monitor again. Suddenly the bots and drones stopped and then began to move away. Mark let out a nervous chuckle of relief. "Damn, Alexandria. You were seconds from returning to Stardust. Shit! You are in no condition to be flying in close orbits." Alex did not know exactly how Mark felt about her, but she was a woman. If his feelings had not been evident, his thoughts were. She had always made sure that they were nothing more than academy mates. If she had to, she would play that one card that most women hold over certain male friends, but she would hold back if at all possible. She liked Mark and did not want to hurt him. Perhaps their friendship would be all that she would need. "Alex, release your con. I'll bring you down. If you continue to fly around like that, you'll lose your license and probably your rank, if not your ass." "Oh, thank you, Mark. I couldn't help myself so much." Mark cut her off. "I know. I'm in the service too, and I've seen you party. Protect our own." He winked at her. "Just sit tight. I'll have you down in a few minutes." The viewer flashed out and Alex sat back. She was inside the border net. She primped, partly to look good and partly to look partied out. The thud of dot contact rolled through her cabin. The next few hours could be pleasant. Some coffee and small talk with an old friend stranded on the dark side of the moon. The airlock compressed and the doors slid open. Alex wondered if she should wander out or wait. After a few seconds, the answer stood before her in the airlock. Sergeant Mark Tsipon was trim, healthy-looking, of average height and well-built, but not stocky. He still kept his jet-black hair in a sort of spiky flat top. His eyes were coal-black, his features having a faint hint of some distant Oriental ancestors. The years had been very kind to him. Alex mourned that most men seemed to age so much better than women. Mark regretted that most women seemed to age better than him. Mark stood looking at Alex as she sat staring at him. After a few elongated seconds, Mark moved into action. "We'll talk later. First, we've got to get you to a safe place. Come." He took a few steps into the cabin and stuck out his hand. Quickly, Alex regained her awareness and stepped into the role she had laid out for herself. She stood up and staggered, brandishing her bottle of bourbon. "Leave that here." Mark pointed at the bottle, and then pointed at Alex. "You need to sober up." Alex smiled, both at Mark and to herself. Her little ploy was working perfectly. She set down the bottle as Mark grabbed her arm and guided her into the airlock. He stopped in the archway and glanced up and down the corridor. No one was present, so he led Alex onward. A little further on, Mark checked the wall console and called up a map showing the location of all station personnel. He thought for a second and then poked the console off. He led Alex down one corridor, through a room, this way and that, clearly trying to avoid contact with other station personnel. It was great fun for Alex. She was in good hands, and that allowed her to play up her drunk role. Her stumbling and giggling gave Mark fits, and she loved it. Quickly rounding a corner, she allowed herself to go down on her knees as she let out a long, girlish squeal. Mark stopped to help her stand. "Silly sphere, you really poured it on, didn't you?" Alex was taken back. That exclamation was a common one. She had used it herself more times than she could count. But now it had a bitter, rude feeling about it. Mark helped her to stand. Her head reeled. not because she was that good an actor. The old curse had punched her in the brain and brought up a nagging that she struggled to suppress. Fortunately, she had picked a ploy that allowed simple explanation for any physical discomfort. She leaned against Mark as he led her onward. They stopped at a door marked Sergeant Tipon. Mark said, "Door." The door scanner analyzed his voice, body size, and mass, and compared its findings with Mark's signature prints, and the door slid open. It was a typical officer's stateroom, small and sparsely furnished, but satisfactory. Mark looked at Alex and said, "Why don't you lay down for a little while? I need to see to your ship and then get back to station. I've still got several hours of duty left. Just stay here. I'll be back, and we can talk over some coffee then." Looking straight into Mark's eyes, Alex squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Mark." He smiled, pointed to the bed, and then fled down the corridor. Officers know when sleep or rest is available, you take it whether you are tired or not. You never know when you will get that chance again, especially when you are on the run. Though she slept during the first part of her flight, she still felt tired and sore. Sleep from drink is never a good sleep. Alex knew she was feeling the pressure of her situation combined with the wasted feeling a drunk leaves behind. She laid down and drifted into a light dream. Reality mixed with thoughts of war and espionage blended with colors and reflections and unbidden glorified images of herself wielding the sphere as a weapon of good swirled in her mind. When she woke, Mark was sitting at his desk reading a magazine on his monitor. "Oh, hi," she said sleepily. "How long have I been out?" "A good long nap, about 4 hours. I bet a shower would feel good." Mark pointed to his facilities. "I brought some clothes from your ship." "Thank you again," Alex said as she made her way to the bath. Warm, smooth, flowing water. It felt so good running down her face and body. Water was a precious resource, especially on field duty. Small craft carry very little of it. Baths and showers are rare luxuries. Wars, death, conspiracy, and mystery all seemed so distant and impotent while she was stripped bare and caressed by that fundamental fluid. As Alex washed away the cares of the last 2 days, Mark prepared a light snack for them. She toweled off and dressed. Stepping out of Mark's personal bath, she was greeted with the full aroma of fresh coffee. All her worries lie ahead of her, and yet she felt bright and awake, like a first day at work after a long vacation. "So, Alex, what sent you drinking through space?" Mark smiled at her. "Work, Mark. Just a lot of pressure lately. I'd rather not talk about it. How about you? What got you stuck with this duty?" "Rosters. I hate 'em. My name came up, and here I am sitting on this cold gray rock watching blips on screens and jumping every time a computer beeps at me. But I've got only 5 more days of this, then it's planet-side new orders. By the way, why'd you mess with your AODT?" "AODT?" Alex questioned with a who-me tone. "Don't jerk with me, Alex. No tech would let something like that slip by. That module was intentionally tampered with. It had to be you. And it was a big risk, too. You nearly set off a full-fledged terrorist alert." Alex looked at her sandwich. "I would rather not talk about it, Mark." She clammed up. "Alexandria, it's me. I can tell you're in trouble. You wouldn't have done that otherwise. You are too much by the book and always have been. Oh, sure, you party as hard as any hooker I've ever been with, but always on your own time and by your rules, and usually, not always, but usually that means safely." Alex looked into Mark's black eyes. They were like hyper holes calling for her to fall into. She wished she could tell him, but that would put him, as well as herself and the galaxy, at risk. If trust could be physical, it would have been Mark's smile. Perhaps she had been wrong all those years ago. Perhaps she should have allowed them some adult play. "I can't tell you anything, Mark. Trust me, please. And please don't push it. I'd hate to pull rank." She raised a corner of her mouth in a self-assured smile. "Hey, no problem. It looked more personal than professional to me. I've mucked up the recordings a bit. No one will have any idea you entered the net here in a drunken stupor. And next time you feel a need to deactivate the automatic transmitter, use this." Mark placed a small module on the table. It transmits a new ship AODT signal. You can use it only once. Once it is accessed, it will be tagged, logged, and automatically updated with your info once they know who you are. Whipped that one up for a cruise I had planned for myself, just in case. Mark smiled a big, sly smile. I'll make another if I need it. So what's next for you? Alex got up and crossed the room to a small window. She asked herself, what is next for me? Keeper of the sphere was no easy task, apparently. She needed to identify her enemy. While she knew that the path ran through Admiral Smalls, she did not know if it stopped with him. The problem was in how to go about it. She had to find some official without being found herself and without anyone learning of her new secret possession. Mark cleared his throat, subtly asking if he had been heard. I'm sorry, Mark. I don't know, really. I've got some things I need to work out. Mark got up and moved closer to Alex, but not too close. He could tell that now was not the time. So what's the problem? Alex looked at Mark and smiled to reassure him that she did not mind where he now was. Then she looked back to the stars as a signal that she did not want him any closer. The problem? Well, I would like to land home rather quietly, if you understand me. But I haven't figured out how to do it. It was one thing when I was a kid, but things are different now. Her brow crinkled tightly like so many other humans when they think hard. Got a C-class port near where you want to be? Mark seemed terribly chipper. Yep. Owen's in the SC district of Southeastus. Mark sprang toward his desk. I'll see if I can clear a course for you. He began tapping and gesturing at his console. Owen's. It's near a fleet base. That makes it tricky, but I can fix almost anything. When do you want to leave? How about right now? Alex said, feeling the pressing weight of the sphere upon her. Sure, why not? Said Mark sadly, feeling the lonely void of the moon's dark side around him.